What's going on, everyone? Today's video is going to be a little different. I wanted to film this yesterday, but I did not have the strength. Yesterday was Mother's Day, and Mother's Day has been hard for me these past few years because my mothers are no longer on earth with me. And despite my prayers and lamentations and visualizations and meditations, I am not a mother myself. And it makes it very hard for me to go on my social media and see people I grew up with their families and the like. So I laid low yesterday. I actually broke down, and thank the gods, my best friend is in this apartment with me. He just let me cry. He held me, told me it was okay, that it was normal for me to feel like this, and reminded me, as a lot of you did on social media, that my mothers are with me. And I appreciate that so much. So I figured, what better way to honor my mothers than to share my story with you? And I realized that I haven't talked about the fact that I'm adopted on this platform. So let's go. I found out that I was adopted the year I turned 10. In February of 1992, my father was retiring from the Army after 20 years of service, and my parents decided that they wanted to settle in Northern Virginia. So while my father and my brother wrapped up some things in New Jersey, where we were, my mother and I made the move to Virginia, and we stayed in a hotel. It was a Days Inn back in those days. It's now the Best Western, the one that's across from Potomac Mills. We stayed there for a month until our house was ready for us. And one snowy night, my mother decides to start telling me a story. She tells me about the abuse she suffered when she was a child and how that warped her view of what love and sex were. She never really developed healthy emotional connections, certainly not with men, because of those things. And she told me how that went on to influence her decisions with any men that came into her life as she grew older. She tells me about how she met my brother's father. My brother is 10 years older than me, and my mother gave birth to him when she was 18 years old. And from what I can recollect, they had a relationship after my brother was born, but it didn't last. My mother is the strongest, smartest, and hardest working women I have known and will ever know. Because while she was raising my brother as an infant, she was also caring for my elderly great-grandmother while going to school full-time, college full-time, and working full-time. And not only did my mother get her bachelor's degree, she got her master's degree and then went on to become a teacher while caring for 2 family members. I will always be inspired by that. So after my mother completes both of her degrees, she meets my father. And as a 10-year-old, I was sitting here listening to this, wondering where the story was going, but very much enraptured. And looking back on it now, I'm like, was there ever any romance in my mother's life? I don't believe there was, because it didn't sound like my father exactly courted my mother. We'll get into that another time. But she tells me about meeting him, their courtship, and their courthouse wedding. And I think that's why my mother wanted me to get married so badly, because my brother and my sister-in-law married at a courthouse. And my mom knew, as girly as I was, that wasn't going to be me. She knew I was going to have a big wedding. So she was just like, when is this happening, girl? One thing I forgot to mention is before she met my father, shortly after the birth of my brother, my mother was diagnosed with cancer and she had to have a hysterectomy. But after meeting my father, after they marry, they start talking about expanding the family. Now, because my brother was between the ages of 7 and 9 when the talks of adoption began, they were like, we're not doing a baby. My brother was so far removed from that stage of life. They were like, we're not going through that again. There will be no diapers. There will be no waking up every 2 hours to feed this child. No, we're not doing that. We will take a toddler and up. That is what we're doing. And that was the request they put in specifically with the agency they went through. But as Jeff Goldblum says in Jurassic Park, life finds a way. They get a call, and the person on the other end of the phone says, I know you said you wanted a toddler, but I just want you to see this child that was just brought in. It's a baby. It is a baby. But we just want you to take a look and maybe consider her. So they make an appointment, they get in the car, and they drive to the Department of Social Services. This little brown chubby baby was placed in my mother's arms. And she said, the minute I saw that baby, the minute I held that child, I knew in my heart that that was my daughter. And guess who that little baby was? It was me. And there was no cataclysmic event. The walls didn't start crumbling. There was no flash of lightning. I did cry. I was an emotional child. What am I talking about? I'm an emotional woman. But I never from that moment on felt like an outsider. I never felt like I was weird or different or wrong or less than in any type of way. My thinking, even at 10 years old, was like, no, this is my family. You know, my brothers never treated me any differently. My parents have never treated me any differently. You know, I never had those, you're not my real mother or you're not my real father moments. Like, none of that ever happened at all. And life just continued. The reason I was told, I remember asking my mother this right after she finished the story. I was like, well, why tell me now? My father, I think I've mentioned on this channel before, was and is an alcoholic. And my brother was the one that told my mother while we were apart from him to tell me, because he did not want my father to, in a drunken rage, tell me where I came from. So that was my brother protecting me from that trauma. And I will always be grateful for that. Because the memory of being told that by my mother on a snowy night in February, 2 months before I turned 10, is a much better memory. So I'm thankful. Then, many, many years later, in my late 20s, I'm living in New York City. And my mother's health had been on the decline basically since my childhood. Like, I do not remember a time where my mother was healthy, vibrant, anything like that. I've only known my mother as sick. And I started to worry because I saw what she was going through. And by the nature of me being Black, like, I'm at a higher risk for diabetes and hypertension, a myriad of things. So I started to take more interest in my health, and I decided that I wanted to find out the medical history of my biological family. So I Googled. I found the Department of Social Services in Alexandria, Virginia, because Alexandria was the city of birth listed on my birth certificate. So I Googled, found the site, printed out the form, got it notarized, and sent it back, simply requesting the medical history of my biological family. And then I forgot about it. Like, I literally forgot that I sent that packet off. And then one day at work, I'm just typing away, and my desk phone starts ringing. I look, and there's a 703 area code. 703 is an area code from Northern Virginia. The last time I had seen a 703 area code on my phone at that point was when my aunt had called to tell me that my mother's heart had stopped beating. So I was terrified to pick it up, but something inside said pick it up. And I did. And it was a very sweet-voiced woman from the Department of Social Services. And she was in shock. She was like, "Oh, I know your family." She said, "I used to work with your older brother. I knew your grandmother. She passed away in 2001. I've met your mother. I know your family. This is incredible." So she tells me that she got my request, obviously, and wants to know if I want to be in contact with my birth family, because I have the choice. She said, you can simply just say, "No, I'd rather not," and just get the medical records. Or what I will do is send a letter to your mother telling her that you have done this and see if she wants to have contact with you. And I said, okay, yeah, go ahead. Ask her if she wants contact with me. Why not? A couple days go by, I get another call. She said, your mother wants to have contact with you. You guys have to wait 30 days before you can have first contact. So I have her contact information. I need yours. And at the end of the 30 days, I will email the both of you with that information. So I got excited. And I said, yes, let's do this. The month went by like that. I almost forgot it happened. And I got that first email in November of 2009. I cried at my desk because staring back at me in these photos that were sent to my work email was the face of the woman that had given birth to me. And when I tell you I look exactly like her, it was trippy because my whole life, people have told me that I looked exactly like my mom, my adoptive mom, the woman that raised me. And it's true. I look like her daughter. I look like my brother. I look like other people in my family that I have grown up with, knowing as my family. And so to see this other woman who looks exactly like me was like, wow, you exist. I exist because of you. It was, I wept. And she sent me pictures of my biological brothers, of which I have 3 that I know of, because later on, when we spoke on the phone, she told me that there were 4 of us. She has 4 children. None of us have the same father. My eldest brother, his father was Italian. My second brother, Matthew, when he was 2, his father showed up and said, I'm going to raise my son. So she only had him from age birth to 2 years old. And then he went to live in Virginia Beach with his father. I was given up for adoption because my mother was on drugs and had the presence of mind to say, I know that I cannot give this child the best life. I could not give it the life that it deserves. So I'm going to give it away. And she told me that when she told my father, my biological father, that she was pregnant, he left. So I probably have more siblings out in these streets that I know nothing about, because I know nothing about my biological father other than he was a black man, which is a funny story. And I'm going to insert it right here. From ages 10 to, I think, how old? 27. Actually, no, maybe even 28. I thought that I was Latino. I thought that I was both black and Hispanic. And I will tell you why. My mother, when she was telling me all of this, told me that the original name on my birth certificate, before it was changed to my mom and my dad, was Jimenez. So they're like, yeah, he was Puerto Rican. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, we didn't know where he was from, actually. All we knew is that he was Hispanic. That's what we were told by, the original birth certificate. So I finally, like, I went to the Puerto Rican Day Parade in New York because I'm like, hey, that's my heritage too, I just, that's what I was told. And then when I finally asked my mother, I was like, where was my biological father from? Do you remember? And she was like, oh no, baby, your biological father was black. What happened was when I went into labor with you, my best friend, who was Hispanic, went with me and I had him sign the birth certificate. I was like, so all of this time, okay. I'm just so confused. But we had that phone call and I thanked her for allowing me to exist because at that point I was living in New York City and I still liked my job at the time. So I was pretty happy and I had a boyfriend at the time. So life was pretty good. I made plans to go to Virginia to meet her face to face. And my boyfriend at the time came with me because I was like, I'm going to need some support, please. And I told my mom that I had found my biological mother. And that was very weird for her. My mother was the type of person that could be very jealous. She made this statement. She's like, now I have to share you with her. And I'm like, first of all, I'm not a possession. And I was a grown woman at the time. Like I said, I was 27 when I met my biological mother. I was like, share me with what? Who? What? And it wasn't even just my biological mom. She did that when my brother and I started dating. Like if we divided our time between family and significant others, she didn't like that. She wanted all of the attention on her. Like every holiday should be spent with her. Any time she deemed appropriate was to be spent with her. It's like we have other responsibilities, ma'am. So that was something that was tough to work through. And I understood. Like I had to explain to her, it's like I didn't go seeking my biological mother because you weren't enough. I wanted to get the medical history. And then when the option was presented to me to have contact, like, I want to know who this woman is. I want to be able to say thank you. If I have brothers and sisters, I want to know who they are. I want to be involved. It's not like I'm trying to replace you or saying I need more love than you're willing to get. No, I just want to know this is my lineage. This is why I'm in your life. So that was a hurdle that we had to get over. I I loved Shirley from the minute I saw her. When I went to Virginia, we met in a parking lot near her apartment. Me, her, my brothers, of which I only met two. I met my oldest brother and my younger brother. My middle brother, I did not meet because, like I said, he went to Virginia Beach to live. And I actually did speak to him on the phone, and we follow each other on social media, so we have a relationship. He and I spoke on the phone, and one of the first things he told me was that he was angry that he never knew I existed. And I was like, well, you know now, so let's just move forward. So we went to a Chinese buffet, which I love. I love a good Chinese food buffet. And we talked, and my younger brother was embarking on a rap career, and he was letting Daniel, my boyfriend at the time, who was a singer, listen to some of his tracks. And I was talking to my older brother. It's like we have to, we know who we are now, and we're going to build, and we're going to be family. And I was like, yes, all of this. I wish we were as tight as I hoped we would have been in my mind. It was difficult because, I was living my own life in New York. Here's the really funny thing about all of this is that my mother had never left Virginia. I lived in Virginia 15 years. And I guarantee, because she lived on Route 1, if y'all are from the DMV, y'all know what Route 1 is. I worked in Arlington, Virginia. I've worked in other parts of Northern Virginia, like just outside of DC. I guarantee I passed her house millions of times going to and from work. But I didn't find her until I moved to New York. Again, the universe has a sense of humor. So we started that day, and I tried to keep in contact with her. The thing that killed me, like whenever I went to Virginia to visit my family, I would call her, let her know that I was coming down. And it was always this weird thing where it's like, okay, let's meet up at 5. And then at 5 o'clock, I would get a call. All right, we're just now leaving the house. I'm like, that's not how this works. And I would get I honestly don't know where my love of punctuality comes from, because nobody in my family is punctual. Even my father, who was in the military. Like, I'm the type of person, like, even now, if I'm working from home, I'm like, if a meeting starts at 10, I'm online at 9:55. Like, I cannot. I hate being late. So I don't know where I got that from. So I got really irritated with that, and it became harder to want to reach out to her whenever I was going to Virginia, because I'm like, am I going to see you this time? Because you keep making it impossible by waiting until the last second to be like, all right, we're leaving. I was only going to Virginia for like finite amounts of time, like maybe like a 3-day weekend. And there are a lot of people to see. So it got difficult, and she would write on my Facebook page, about how hurt she was and how she wishes we were closer. And I would literally say, like, listen, this is a 2-way street. Like, you can always call me too. Like, you guys can hop in a car and come up to New York to visit me too. Like, I know you're not in the best financial situation, but we can find some way to make this work. Like, it doesn't have to be all me or all you. And that was one of my frustrations with her. There was a time where I did call her, and we had a great conversation for 2 hours, and I kept meaning to call her, but I kept putting it off. September of 2017, I was getting ready for a friend's wedding, and I saw an Instagram DM on my phone, and it was from my younger brother. And he said, "You have to call me, baby girl." And I said, "What is it?" He said, "It's about Mom." And I said, "Is she gone?" He said, "Yes." To rewind a little bit, my mother, Shirley, had been diagnosed with colon cancer. I didn't know it was colon cancer at the time. I found out a few months later, as I was doing my own annual physical with my doctor, and when it asked if any type of cancer ran in your family, and I didn't know which one it was, so I asked my younger brother, and he said it was colon cancer. I knew that she had lost mobility, and that she was going to have surgery on her back to regain mobility in her legs. There were pictures I had seen of her on her Facebook page of her using a wheelchair, and she didn't look ill. She just wasn't able to walk. So what happened, according to my younger brother, was that she went in for spinal surgery, and her body wasn't healing on the timetable that the doctors had set up. So they were preparing to move her to a rehab facility, and her body just said no more. And she was gone. My biological mother, Shirley, was only 53. 53 years old when she died. My biological mother gave me up because she was a drug addict, and she dedicated the years that I had known her to going to college to become certified as a substance abuse counselor, so that she could lead others to the road to recovery the way she had found it. and she never got the chance to. I finished getting ready for the wedding, and I said, I'm not going to wear my heartbreak out on the dance floor. I'm not going to let my personal tragedy wreck my dear friend's day. This is their wedding day. This is the happiest day of their life. I'm not going to make it about me at all. So I put on a brave face. I went out there, had the time of my life. And then the next day, on the way back to home, I let myself break down. I didn't get to go to her wake or anything. I don't know where she's buried. I'm hoping that when this is all over, I can meet up with my brothers and go see where she's laid and pay my respects. It's definitely one of the first things on my list. Now, my mom, Marilyn, our relationship was complicated. It could be because I'm an Aries, she's a Leo, we're both fire signs, very volatile in that household. But my mother and I, we could not be different people. Like, I'm sitting here glammed up for y'all. My mother wouldn't, I think I've only seen my mother in makeup once or twice. I remember being at a MAC counter, or no, it wasn't even MAC, it was Fashion Fair at the mall, and it took like 2 hours for an entire makeover. I'm pretty sure she bought everything they suggested, but never put it on. She actually would yell at me as an adult for taking so long to get ready. Like, you just put on whatever clothes and get out of the house. That's not your daughter. And I've said it in my Why I Spoke Out video. My mother had DID, and that also played a role. But I have great memories of my mom. Both of my mothers made me the woman I am. The biggest chunk of that being showing me how not to live life, but knowing their stories and what they went through, of course that shaped who I am as a woman. The funny thing to me is that both of my mothers are exactly the same person. They were both short, diabetic, Mormon, black women. I don't know what how does that happen? I was like, they were both baptized in the Mormon church, and they were exactly the same woman. They had a tendency to embellish. Like, my mother, I burned a carpet when I was 10 years old. If my mom had told you the story, honey, you would have thought I had burnt down the house. Like, it was the spot that big. But you would have thought I set the whole house on fire because she just had to embellish. My mama, Shirley, when we started having our first conversations, tried to convince me that we were related to Steve Harvey. She was like, well, his father did this and his mother did this and they married these people and then this is how our family member got it. I was like, you know what? How many letters, because she said she wrote him a letter, how many letters do you think Steve Harvey gets a day of black people trying to claim him as family? And, my mom, Marilyn, loves to tell us that we are descendants from Sally Hemings. I'm like, listen, it is okay if our families come from humble beginnings. Okay, we don't have to claim every famous black person. It's okay. We don't have to try to connect ourselves to every black person out here doing big things. Okay? I have said before that my mother told me this is Marilyn now. She told me she was terminal. All of her conditions were declared terminal in October of 2016. And I begged for one more Christmas with my mom. And I got that. When Shirley died in September 23rd of 2017, I called my mom and told her. I was like, Shirley's gone. And it was the first death that fully hit me. And my mom's like, you've never had anybody close to you die before. That's why this is hitting you so hard. And I said, it also makes me terrified for you because I feel like you're next. And she protested. She's like, nope, I'm going to be there to argue with you. I'm going to be there to help you raise your babies. Don't worry. And I tried my hardest to believe that. November of 2017, I went to Kansas City to go to the military ball with my boyfriend at the time. We had such a good visit. I honestly wish that was my last memory of him because it was such a good visit. We had such a good time. We enjoyed each other. It was an amazing weekend. So much so that I wanted to tell my mother about it. So I called her. So I called twice and got a busy tone each time. And I'm sitting there in a Kansas City barbecue restaurant talking to my boyfriend. And I see my mother's number on my phone. So I rush outside. And my father's on the phone. He said, your mother is being taken to the hospital via ambulance. She couldn't breathe and she collapsed. Actually, when you were trying to call the first time, I was on the phone calling the ambulance. When you called the second time, she was being loaded into the ambulance. So I was like, okay, we've been through this before. I'm just gonna get home and deal with it then. So I flew back from Kansas City to New York, not really worrying about anything. Monday, while I'm at work, my father calls me and tells me that the doctors are going to run tests on my mother because her brain was deprived of oxygen for an amount of time, so they need to see if there is any brain damage. And he was like, I will call you as soon as I know something. They won't know until tomorrow. I said, okay. So I try not to freak out. I did let myself cry a little bit because obviously it's a sad event, but I was like, we've been down this road before. My mother's been in a coma before and she came back. We're going to hold on to hope. The next night, my father calls me and tells me that my mother is brain dead. And he wants to know how soon I can get to Virginia. And I said, I can be there tomorrow because the way my father was presenting it, they were trying to make a decision as a family whether or not to turn off the machines. And I said, well, Mom had always said she doesn't want to live on machines. So we have to let her go. So I said, just let me get down there so I can say goodbye. I walked into my mother's room at the hospital. And it's so weird because it looked like she was asleep. I know people say that a lot when they see their loved ones. It just looked like she was asleep with a bunch of tubes. And I touched her and her hand was cold. I knew she was already gone. But I told her not to worry, that everything with me was going to be fine, that I was going to be taken care of. I thought by my boyfriend at the time, because he and I had talked about marriage that last trip. And I told her that everything she taught me, whether directly or indirectly, I was going to use. Before my mom passed, she made me promise that any money she left me was going to be used to move to California because she knew I was unhappy in New York. And what mommy doesn't want her baby girl to be happy. So I told her that I will hold her to that promise. And here I am, sitting in my apartment in California. My brother, my sister-in-law, my nephew, my niece, my father, and my dearest friend, Sako, We were all in the room when the doctors and nurses came to take my mother off of life support. That is an image I will never get out of my head. And it's an image I don't want to get out of my head. Because another promise my mother made me make to her was that I would lose weight and be healthy so that I would never have to go through what she went through. My mother was diabetic, and her kidneys had gone kaput to the point where they wanted to do dialysis 5 times a week. And at that point, I knew she was gone, because I was like, that means your kidneys are gone. Like, your kidneys are no longer functioning. And after, I think that was 2 weeks before she passed, when she told me that. I promised my mom, as I was saying goodbye, that I was going to live my best life. Because another conversation that we had before she passed, and I think she knew her time was coming, because she started trying to teach me how to live. She said, don't wait until you're 55 before you take your first real vacation. The first family vacation we ever took was when we went to Myrtle Beach in 2009. And my mom was 55 years old. She actually said stop, because I was working a lot of overtime. She said, stop working yourself to death for a job that doesn't care about you. If you dropped dead, they would have an ad for your position before your obituary hit the paper. She said, do everything it is that you want to do. Chase your dreams. Make them happen. Please. And that meant a lot to me, because my mother used to never support my dreams of being an entertainer or anything like that. She was very much you were going to get your college degree, you were going to work a 9 to 5, and you were going to have a normal life. So to hear her say this now, it was almost like she was giving me permission to be fully who I was. And I promised her that I would do all those things. And truly, the best way to honor my mothers, both of them, is to live my best life. To not settle, because I've seen what happened to them when they settled. To go beyond what people think I can do. To not limit myself. To not put myself in a box. To not simply do because others say I should. And that's how I live. I get angry. I said this on social media. I get angry that there will be things that I go through that every daughter should have her mother there for. What happens when I do reach success out of nowhere? What happens if I do become famous? I won't be able to share that with her. I always had this dream of walking with my mother on a red carpet. That's been taken from me. What happens when I do meet Chris Evans, and he puts the ring on it? I won't have either of my mothers there to argue with me about the fact that I want to get married on Halloween and have an Addams Family themed wedding. I won't have my mom, Marilyn, there to argue with me about showing too much cleavage. My dress could be up to here. My mom be like, you showing too much titty, okay? won't have her there to argue with me about me not taking my husband's last name. Because I actually got into that conversation with my mom, and she acted like I was committing some sort of cardinal sin. But I won't have her there to call if and when I get pregnant. I won't have her there in the waiting room waiting to meet her grandchild. I get angry at those things. But the thing that gives me the most peace when I have those moments is knowing that when those things come my way, they're because of my mothers. they could no longer do for me in their physical form. So they shuffled off this mortal coil. I'm going to say it. I'm going to use the line from Star Wars. You know, strike me down and I will become more powerful than you could ever imagine. I do believe that in their ethereal forms, they have become more powerful forces in my life. And I know that me having my dream job was due in part to my mother's influence on the gods. She's like, I always wanted my baby to have a government job. Y'all better make this happen. I'm gonna annoy you until it happens. You know? When I do meet the man of my dreams, it's gonna be like, I'm gonna need you to send her the right one now, because we're tired of not seeing some grandbabies on Earth, okay? So I say to you watching this video, if you have your mother or a maternal figure in your life, if you yourself are a mother, count your blessings. Count your blessings. Hug your mothers, your maternal figures, and hug your babies as tight as you can. Because some of us can only wish for those things. My days of being jealous of my friends and their children are gone. It's literally just a mom-sized hole in my heart that has yet to be filled. Thank you for watching. If you've made it this far, you're a star. Please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. All of those good things. I know there are a million videos you could have watched today. I humbly thank you for coming to Slay.